What's going on, everyone? My name is Twig, and today we are talking about Skelethrone Chronicles of Ericona, a Metroidvania Souls-like style game made by a solo developer. It was released just about 12 days ago, I believe. I found it browsing on Steam about a week after it released, and I knew I had to play it right away. It's a challenging 2D action platformer with RPG elements inspired by games like Castlevania and Dark Souls, which is right up my alley. Before we dive deeper into this title, I do want to mention that I started this Review After 100% series of videos to post here on YouTube starting earlier this year. I've been writing written reviews covering games that I get all achievements for on Steam for a couple years now, so if you game on PC, feel free to add me on Steam or even join my curator group on there. Both will be linked down below. Without further ado, let's hop right into this one. Skelethrone, The Chronicles of Ericona, has a beautiful, unique art style to complement the 2D gameplay. It is currently priced at $12.74 on Steam, featuring a 15% discount until August 21st, where then it will go back up to full price of $15. It is also available on Switch, Xbox, and PlayStation, which is pretty cool. This game features unique upgrades for movement and combat, which keeps things fresh as you explore a huge world of vastly different areas, filled with a multitude of different enemies. Test your skills against a ton of bosses and creatures inspired by the Dark Ages. There is a vague, overlying story that opens up to you as you progress and talk to NPCs along your journey. Make choices that affect the story to achieve one of two different endings. There is a lot of exploration in this one and many different secrets that are waiting to be found. During my 2 full playthroughs to achieve both endings in the game, I ran into just a handful of bugs. The first one I encountered was when I sometimes fell from too high or into a pit where I would take damage. My character would freeze in place and the damage sound would be stuck on a loop playing through my headset. This was very quickly patched and taken care of though, and that's pretty much all I ran into in my first playthrough, which took roughly around 24 hours. But after starting my second playthrough, I did come across 2 more bugs. About halfway through the game or so, after defeating a certain boss, my character would freeze and be stuck in place. I honestly thought I was just going to have to start a new playthrough over because I was forced to quit out, which takes you back to the last bonfire you rested at. I beat him about 4 times with the same result, and I ended up posting on the Steam discussion board looking for help. I tried using a keyboard and mouse. I minimized the game after alt-tabbing out. Nothing really could get my character unstuck, which had me super worried. I finally decided that maybe I needed to trigger something else in the game, so I went and killed a different boss and cleared an entire other area, then came back, and to my surprise it let me move again. The other one I ran into was after looting a certain piece of late game armor, my stamina meter would regenerate like super slowly. I immediately quit out of the game, which fixed the problem, except whenever I would enter that room again it would trigger it over. Thankfully the room could be avoided completely, but I've seen other people on Steam reporting the same issue, so it should be fixed soon. Overall, it's been a pretty smooth experience playing through the game, and for a solo dev with a few testers, it's been decently polished, I'd say. While there are technically 3 different difficulties in this game, only 2 actually change the difficulty as a whole. Story mode is the easier difficulty intended for players who want to just focus on the story and struggle less with bosses as well as progress quicker. Journey mode and exploring difficulty are both the way that the dev intended players to play the game, except journey mode will display hints. I played my first playthrough on exploring mode, and I have to say it was pretty challenging. There were multiple bosses that I struggled with, and I had to practice over and over. I had around 300 deaths in total in that playthrough, taking roughly 24 hours or so, although I did explore the map to the fullest. I obtained all weapons, collectibles, rings, armor, all that stuff, so I spent a good amount of time learning the map and traversing each area to the fullest. My second playthrough I did on story mode to see the difference in enemy weakness as well as how fast I could level, and dude, the difference is absolutely insane. I died a total of like 5 times and flew through the game in about 6 hours. And I went after all the hidden shards and weapons too so that I could document where they were found, which added a little bit of time. In that playthrough I made all the opposite choices I did in my first playthrough so that I could obtain all the other achievements and achieve the second ending, which I think I liked better. If you're wanting a more chilled, laid-back experience of enjoying the world surrounding you, then I would definitely recommend story mode. But if you're a hardcore Metroidvania gamer, you will not be disappointed in the challenge that exploring mode offers. I found myself having to master boss attack patterns in my first playthrough because they could literally kill you in 2 hits, while in my other playthrough I was just tanking hit after hit because I could out-heal them and not be in any trouble. You assume the role of Ericona, a lord destined for death by treachery, who avoided it in favor of a more grim fate. We won't go into a lot of detail of the story here because there's quite a lot for you to uncover and experience along the way, but I do want to give a taste of how the game starts off and your overlying quest as you progress. The game starts off with the bell ringing and a spirit making its way through a battlefield graveyard of skeletons. You are awakened and feel a presence of someone calling you. You grab a nearby rusty sword and take off in an unknown direction in hopes of uncovering who or what woke you, and more importantly, why. As soon as you start to move around, the first thing I noticed was how crisp the movement felt. Jumping isn't too floaty, swinging your sword feels tight, rolling is quick, and you can backstep to dodge. And also, menuing is great. The menus are nice and simple, the aesthetic fits perfectly, I can tell easily what I'm looking at, stat requirements for weapons, buffs for certain armors and rings that I want to equip. Right off the bat, I knew I was going to enjoy this game. The art style is unique, environment in the foreground makes for unique combat, hidden secrets, traps, and enemies. As I got further into the game, I couldn't believe this was made by one guy. You have your standard health and stamina bar in the top left corner of your screen, accompanied by your ether bar, which is basically the juice that you use when you activate your weapon's special ability. Some weapons have one special, some have none, and some even have two. When you kill enemies, you get souls currency, which you can use to level up your stats. The 5 stats are strength, vitality, endurance, dexterity, and spirit. That's not the only thing that you'll be spending your souls on though, as there are a couple vendors in the game where you can buy necessary items to progress through the game, as well as some optional items that other NPCs are looking for. These in turn will reward you with cool stuff like this sweet scythe. There are a ton of weapons in the game, many different armor sets, which don't have a visual effect on your character because that would be a lot of time and resources spent rendering animations in all of them, but they all have unique effects that will benefit your character depending on what type of enemy you're fighting or what area you are traversing. I found myself swapping different pieces quite often to help with boss battles, depending on the weight cost to benefit ratio. There are a ton, and I mean a ton, of bosses in this game. Around 30 different boss fights in total between the 2 playthroughs to get the 2 unique endings, because depending on the choices that you make during the game will affect who you will face next, which I'll talk more in depth about during the achievement section later in this video. The ending is based off a singular choice that you make throughout the game, but you can face more or less bosses depending on some of your other choices. For example, when you defeat the Mushroom Slaver, you can decide if you want to kill or spare him, and if you spare him, then you immediately have to face one of the more tougher earlier game bosses in my opinion. It's cool little things like that that add to the overall experience and have you thinking about whether you want to spare or kill someone. I did a good playthrough the first time through and then an evil playthrough my second time through. One thing I really like that Skelethrone does is that you get almost all of your traversal movement abilities fairly early to mid-game, so that gives you a lot of time to use and perfect them as you explore the map. Honing your skills and fine-tuning which weapons fit your playstyle helps shape your character as you get later in the game, taking on harder bosses and less forgiving enemies that do a ton of damage. Another thing that I found to be super sick is that you collect shards that you find out in the wild to ultimately make up an Estus flask after you get 5 of them, thus rewarding you with another swig of healing. Another benefit of finding these shards is that they give you a knowledge point to use in your skill tree. You start at the center and you can route your way through the tree however you want to build your character. There are kind of basically a few different paths that you can specialize in if you want to optimize a certain build, using blunt, blades, two-hand, or ammo for a bow, but of course being an unga bunga type of player with a two-handed big cleaver, I went the two-hander route. I put a ton of points into stamina, health, and picking up ether points when I could. The two-handed weapons feel so good that I couldn't resist using them. There is parrying in this game, blocking in this game, and there are achievements tied to both of those, so I had to use them for a little bit of time, but ultimately I gravitated towards dodging and using my abilities to take down enemies. I focused on leveling up strength, of course, with an emphasis in endurance, to help me swing and dodge as much as I wanted. The knowledge points really help get your character powered up, whereas spending souls on stats feels more like a prerequisite to using certain weapons. You can respec using an item which you can buy from a vendor, but it can be costly. You can also reroll knowledge points using a purchasable item to help you truly fine-tune builds, which is also super cool. Like I said, I primarily played the game using a two-handed weapon. As soon as I picked up the claymore, I used that, and then I tried out a few other options, but ultimately settled on the hangman's cleaver. This thing is absolutely a monster, but honestly a lot of weapons feel right on par. The scythe hits extremely hard with its super high base damage, but I just really love these specials of the claymore and the hangman's cleaver. You can use one of the specials for the claymore to help navigate to certain items that you can't jump to yet, which is really useful early game. You have a bow, you later get a pistol, so you have some ranged options as well. You can block using a variety of shields that specialize in different forms of damage. You can parry using your shield or using your weapon with a tighter window. Ultimately, combat feels amazing. You get double jump right after the first boss in the game, you get your wings a little bit down the line so that you can fly, and then you get a dash about midway through or so. All of these abilities help you dodge bosses' attacks and bypass certain enemies you don't want to face. There are a ton of different enemies, some really annoying ones, some creepy ones, some friendly looking ones, and some that you won't want to ever see again. There is an achievement for getting 25 different weapons, and I've got to say, they all look and feel very different. They each specialize in different playstyles, which make for some cool builds and runs to do down the line. All of the bosses are unique. Some you can beat using the same game plan. For example, hit twice, dodge behind, hit once, dodge behind, rinse and repeat that until you do a special attack. But ultimately, the bosses all feel different and use different attacks to keep you on your toes. Especially if you're playing on Explorer mode, a boss can kill you so easily that you'll have to memorize their attack patterns in order to beat them, whereas you can sometimes get away with just spamming attacks and tanking hits on story mode. With there being 44 achievements, there are obviously going to be collectible ones in the game like this. Those collectible achievements are some of the most fun in my opinion, although I really enjoyed obtaining both endings in this one. I believe I liked the real ending the best, but the heroic ending had a great send-off as well. The ending is decided based on one choice that you make decently early in the game. I won't spoil what that choice is, because it really does have a twist on the final boss, but it'll be obvious which one you need to pick differently next time if you decide to have a good playthrough on your first time through and spare every enemy you are given the option of sparing. There are achievements tied to defeating bosses, which some are optional bosses, that you only get access to by sparing other bosses, oddly enough. There are task achievements like parry or block 200 attacks, which I started off parrying a ton until I realized I really like dodge rolling, so I had to grind out all of those in the end. Collect 13 rings, 25 different weapon types, 50 shards of essence. The 50 shards one actually had me worried a little bit because I got to 47 or so and literally couldn't find any more. There were a few that were dropped from killing certain enemies throughout the game that I needed, and I watched a video by this guy on YouTube to help me track down some of them. His name is RB69 Gaming, and he's put up a few videos covering content on Skelethrone, which is super cool and really useful. I'll link his channel down below because he did help me out a lot. The last achievements are missable and are tied to doing unique things through some of the boss battles. I would try to focus on them in my second playthrough, preferably on story mode, because some of them can be a little tough. Other than a few minor bugs that are getting ironed out, I don't personally have any negatives to list for this game. I had a blast playing through this one, even really enjoyed my second playthrough to clean up any achievements I may have missed. I thought of two different things that may make the game even better in my mind, even though I'd give this game a 10 out of 10 on the fun rating. And those are a more detailed map and the addition of consumable healing ether items to top off healing or ether. Although the map is fine the way it is, if it showed exactly where you were instead of just telling you like an overall area section, it would help you pin down certain items that need to be found that are hidden in the area. There is a ring that you can equip that help with this, but in relation to overall map knowledge, a lot of it is memory based and not choreographed. With the consumables, I really didn't run into any problems with not having enough healing, except for my first playthrough where I'd go forever before finding a bonfire. There are lantern checkpoints as well as bonfires in this game. The bonfires are where you level, rest, and refill, and they're spread out kind of far apart, while lanterns are little checkpoints that you get teleported back to if you die. Activating these doesn't refill anything unless you do die. I don't think the game necessarily needs consumables, but it would be a nice little touch to be able to hold on to a few of them if you need them. Two huge positives for me are the combat mechanics and the traversal abilities. They keep the interaction with enemies fun and the feeling between bosses fresh. All of the areas have a different feel, and the music ties them together nicely. The music in the final area is absolutely killer, and the boss music is top-notch. Boss battles were frustrating, but completely worth the struggle after beating them. I'm also a huge fan of multiple endings and collectibles, so I had a blast with those. The world and story just seems so well put together. Some turns in the story you see coming, others not so much. It was just a joy to experience this one. There is not a verified status for this one on the Steam Deck, and around lunchtime there were some controller input issues with this game on the newer Steam Decks, but with the new 1.2 update, people have said this game plays good now. When I gave it a try, I played through the first area without any problems, and the controls felt good. Everything felt great with default settings, and I do want to go through another playthrough on there whenever I get time. If you're a fan of Blasphemous or Last Faith, then you won't be disappointed with this title. Supposedly there was a short prequel game called Skelethrone The Prey that came out earlier this year in March that I completely missed. I'm kind of thinking of going back to experience that one. It has some tasteful no-hit associated achievements with it, and seems fairly short, but the story is supposed to take place a few decades before the events in this game's main campaign. Overall, for the amount of money I paid for this one, I definitely got my money's worth, and the prequel is free, I believe. 30 hours of game time between two playthroughs, finishing up just in time to start Wukong later this evening. Really loving these indie Metroidvania style games lately, so let me know of any that have caught your eye as well. I can't wait to see what this developer does next because this was killer. As always, thank you for watching. If you stayed this late in the video, I've got to wrap this thing up so I can get it out, since it's been quite a while since the last review. I'll be grinding Black Myth as well as some smaller indie titles, so be on the lookout for those. Smash the like button, it helps a ton. Consider subscribing to hear more of my rambling about games I enjoy, or add me on Steam to see what I'm currently playing. I appreciate all of you watching, it does mean a lot, and I look forward to the next one. Have a great start to your week. Peace.